Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm actually speaking from Sunderland, UK. My name is Uche Anyanwagu. I'm a medical doctor and an epidemiologist, and currently trying to find my way around family medicine or family general practice, as we call it here. So I'm in my last year of training for that. So that's my second specialty qualification. So I'm just going to briefly take us through what genocide is. We are going to look at the definitions. We are going to look at the use or the politics of language. We are going to explore the meanings, and we are going to drive this from Rwanda to Biafra to Armenia to Guatemala, wherever it is. So let's go on. Okay. So this quote from Kofi Annan actually sums it up for me. And he said that a genocide begins with the killing of one man, not for what he has done, but because of who he is. Let us keep this at the back of our mind and reflect as I take us through genocide, killing of somebody simply for who he or she is. Okay, so, and I'm going to take us through this format: what is genocide, the politics of language of genocide, then steps to genocide. We briefly explore the situation today. I am aware that other speakers are going to explore in deeper the other aspects of it, and what I term the call for action. So let us just take the very simple dictionary meaning. Is the systematic process of killing a large group of people. It begins with one person, as Kofi Annan told us. Another keyword there is the deliberate. So it's deliberate. It's a deliberate and systemic destruction of a group of people because of their ethnicity, religion, race, or nationality. And it's derived from the Greek word genus, which means race or tribe or nation, and the Latin term side, which means killing. So if you put it side by side, is sort of racial killing or killing someone because of. So the works of Raphael Lemkin, a Polish-born jurist who served as an advisor to the US Department of War, was quite key in defining this term and mainstreaming it, in fact, making it part of our language today. And the other synonyms of phrases relating to genocide is physical destruction, intent to destroy, indiscriminate killing, wholesale killing, and the rest of them. So we carry on. And now, if we look at genocide in greater details as by the Genocide Convention, which was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948, and this came into force in 1951. So it went on to further broaden the scope of genocide to include any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy. Intent to destroy. So whether in whole or in parts, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious groups. So the other acts of genocide, which are going to list about 5 of them: killing members of the group, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to the members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction in whole or in part, and imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, or forcibly transferring children, from one group to another. So all these things are classified as acts of genocide. And so if you look at this genocide, the Genocide Convention adopted by the UN, you can see that it includes a mental element. That's the intent, the intention to cause harm, to destroy. Then it also has the physical elements, which I've listed about 5 things previously. And these must occur concurrently for you to prove that a genocide has occurred under international law. Another thing too that we need to be aware of is that genocide can take place both in time of war and in time of peace. So let us not be carried away thinking that it's only maybe during war that we can have this. And It's also an internationally recognized crime. It's a crime against humanity. And it is also punishable under Article 3 of the Genocide Convention. So if there is an act of genocide, if there is conspiracy to commit genocide, if there is incitement to commit genocide, if there is an attempt, or if there is complicity in committing genocide, so one can actually be tried based on these 5 things. So genocide itself, the conspiracy to commit it, inciting people to do that directly or indirectly, then attempting to do it, and maybe being complicit in the planning or execution or both of it. So when we go down to the politics of the language, and this is where it gets a bit tricky. And if you look at the definition of genocide, you can see that we have many cases that should properly be labeled as genocide at various scales across the globe, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to label them so. Now, the reasons I found out were, one, who is actually committing this? So you can imagine when countries or some bigger countries commit this, it is swept under the carpet. So whether it's the Americans killing the First Nations or the Canadians and Australians, the Aborigines, then it's probably swept under the Persian rug of history. Or British and Russia helping to commit the Biafran genocide, which we are going to hear in more details by the speakers after me. Or even the current ongoing genocide going on in Northern Tigray in Ethiopia, surprisingly by the Prime Minister, who 2 years ago or so won a Nobel Peace Prize. So it's quite a bit dicey. Then another thing too that makes it difficult for us to define what genocide is the wording of the Genocide Convention. So the definition includes a mental element, that's the intent to kill, and the physical element, that's killing people, stopping people to give birth, transferring children, forcibly transferring children to other group, and the likes. So while it is very easy to prove the physical act of genocide, the mental element, that's the intent, remains very difficult because we are all going to struggle to prove that. So the mental element, that's the intent to destroy, requires, so the mental element is actually the intent to destroy, as I said before. So it requires both the act and the intent, according to the Genocide Convention definition. So it needs both the intent and act to be established before you can say that this is a crime, genocide has been committed. So, and you can see that a criminal act lacking the appropriate intention by the offender will not often actually amount to a crime, because we've not been able to establish that there is an intent, there is this willingness or desire to kill or to annihilate, even when acts of that have occurred. So as with crime, the physical element of genocide is relatively easy to establish. As we are going to learn today in the context of the Biafran War, it's very easy to establish, but the difficulty lies in obtaining the actual proof beyond reasonable doubt about the intention, whether the intention of the group, of the perpetrator, was to destroy the group. So it is this special intent that makes the crime of genocide so unique. And that's why many cases of genocide, people going scot-free with it, even having committed it. So, so how do we, so the big question now remains, oh, sorry, I think I've skipped a slide. Okay, so this is where the problem lies. So perpetrators are fully aware that if they admit their intention, it's going to interfere with them achieving that purpose. So definitely they are not going to admit that this is what they want to do. And they also know that admitting will make them complicit and will definitely rope them in, so they wouldn't admit. And it's even harder when it is an ongoing stuff. If the genocide is still going on, as we have seen the terrorist Fulani headsmen carrying on with their dastardly acts every night. So as it's still going on, admitting that such crime or they have such intent is going to definitely prevent them from achieving whatever their aim is. So these are the things that make it's very difficult for us to prove the intention of the intent to commit genocide. So the big questions remain: was there an intent to fiscally destroy the Igbo nation? Upcoming speakers will address this. Then how do we establish this intent? Since intention, unlike fiscal act, is not something that is tangible. So that's another thing that we have to focus on. As they say, the devil does not even know the heart of man. So it's quite difficult to establish intent. But one of the ways in law which has been explored, I'm going to give about 2 cases in law which have been explored, is to draw inference from the perpetrator's external actions. So the action has occurred, but you can draw inference to what the likely intent would be. So all you have to do is to gather the relevant facts and circumstances around that act, and you can use that to infer, to say that this person actually did this to cause harm or to exterminate a particular group. Now, a number of international law cases can help us to put this in context. Now, if you look at the Rwandan genocide, and in the cases versus the prosecutor and Muvunyi and Gakum Bitsi, the tribunal went on to say that it is possible to infer genocidal intent inherent in an action, and you can charge that from the perpetrator's deed and utterances together, as well as the general context of the perpetration of other culpable acts. So the tribunal went on to hold that evidence of genocidal intent can be inferred from fiscally targeting of the group or their property, the use of derogatory language towards members of the targeted groups, then weapons employed in carrying out the acts, and the extent of bodily injury, or the methodological way, because from the first definition we gave, we said it's a deliberate and it's a systematic way of doing things. So if you put all these things together, if you piece all this together, you can say, yes, the intent can be established. And today, when we study more, we are going to see whether that can be established for the BIAFRA case. Okay, so we'll go now to the stages of genocide. There are about 10 stages, 10 steps gradually. And let me tell us this: genocide doesn't just start occurring a day. Most times, a whole lot of work is put into it. It can span over years, or even decades, or even centuries. And all these things gradually build up to the last stage of it. So we are going to gradually take this stage one by one. So there is this issue of classification, where you try to classify the group you want to attack different from other groups. So it's the we versus them, or the us versus them group, and they are easily given labeled. Then another thing too that happens is that there could be symbolization, and by this, like in the Holocaust, they were given yellow Star of David in Nazi German, and it was easy to identify Jews. So there's this idea of symbolization, and in Nigeria today, we can also see that being used by a dot in a circle, or spare parts dealers, or whatever, using certain languages that you can use to identify these people, and it could be based on anything, including tribal marks or accent, the way people talk. That could be enough to symbolize them. Then another thing is discrimination. I will leave this for us to really ponder about. The relationship of the Nigerian state with the Igbos or the Easterners. And the next step, it goes down to humanization. It's very common that you hear all this saying that Nigeria has an Igbo problem. So they think that, demonize them, make them the cause or the scapegoats. Let it be, paint them as the people causing all the problems we have, so that we can have justifiable reasons to attack them or to do whatever thing that we want to do on them. Then when you think about organizations too, most times, though this is not very common in Nigeria, but most times too, these people are given a particular area separate from others. So this makes it easy for you to target them and for them to be easily killed or attacked without collateral damages. Then the other issue is polarization. So we try to look at the fractal lines, and we have seen General Buhari has really done this very well, trying to divide Nigeria so much clearly along religious and ethnic lines. These lines have been there before, but he has purely exploited it today, and it's very clear to everybody what this whole thing is all about. Then this leads us to the eighth stage, and that's the stage of preparation. So in the Eastern case, we can see the pre-independence crises, even when Igbos were not involved, even when the problem is between other ethnic groups, Igbos have been taken out, even when they draw a cartoon in somewhere in France, and the next you target Igbos and so the preparation has been there. The pre-independence crises that we have, the counter coup of July in 1966, the pogroms in the north that followed shortly after that, then that went on. Then the issue of persecution, we have words like marginalization, and currently today in the government, we've seen that Igbos do not amount anything to come to be at the meeting in Nigeria where security issues are being discussed. They've been completely removed from every military and paramilitary hierarchy. Then the next stage is the stage of extermination. So whether this comes as the gas chambers going off and the Jews being marched into the gas chambers and gassed to death, or whether it comes as a full-scale war as we had between 1967 and 70 that was backed up with blockade and starvation policy, and the economic policies that followed shortly after, the 20 pounds given to people for the amounts held in Nigerian banks, and the indigenization policy that made sure that this particular group was excluded. So all these things are there. Then the next and final issue is the issue of denial, which we are still seeing today. The Nigerian state seems to be, in fact, they have an apartment here, they are living rent-free in this denial phase. Even 51 years after the Civil War ended, the federal government, they fought very hard to silence the truth, but all to no avail. Britain and Russia, because of their complicity in this whole thing too, they've also been silent. And the Bight of Biafra in the continental shelf has been renamed to Bight of Bonny, so that there will be no mention of the word. Okuta panel presented a little opportunity for the nation to heal and to foster real reconciliation. Unfortunately, the panel wasn't taken serious. Igbos made a very lovely presentation there. The panel came up with a recommendation which never saw the daylight. There is no history about the Civil War taught in schools or taught anywhere. Federal schools, even in our own states, which is hard. Then they censor movies around Biafra. I remember when Chimamanda's Half of a Yellow Song was to premiere in Nigeria, they refused that it would, and they had to edit and remove so many parts of the movie, making it so useless for people to go and watch. I mean, losing the real essence of the message. Then we've seen this incidental arrest of pro-Biafran agitators. And we've also seen these same people taking photos with bandits, their so-called bandits, with terrorists and the rest of them. Then even innocent civilians, okay, let's leave the agitators around. Let's leave the self-determination groups around. What of innocent civilians? Recently, Chiwetalago was arrested for just adorning clothes with Biafran colors. So anything with red, green, and white, or anything with any sign of a sun on it, you are fully at risk. This is the denial phase. So that leads us to the situation today, because many actors of this genocide are still alive and with us. One of them is currently our president, and they are living in denial and in a utopian unity, which is based on falsehood and deceit. And that's why the country has not still been able to unite. So both the federal and state governments, they've all failed to document what happened so that we can learn from it and have the real essence of never again. So genocides of all types at all levels keep happening in Nigeria. And some of us may be familiar with this document, which has been presented to the US Secretary of State at the moment about the silent slaughter, the silent genocide going on in Nigeria against Christians, against ethnic minorities all over by this same group. So we hope that this is the action it deserves, because it was actually a demand from the Trump administration for these documents to be sent. Unfortunately, Trump didn't win, and I hope that they follow this up to its logical conclusion. So now for me, I will conclude with a call for action. We have some lessons to learn from Armenia, and not really going deeper into this, but Armenia was in Turkey. And this is the first nation in the world to make Christianity its official religion. So this was a clearly Christian nation. But during the reign of the Ottoman Empire, they were absorbed and they were treated as infidels. I just want to use this so that we can draw parallel and see the lessons we can learn from Armenia. So when the Ottoman Empire crumbled, they thought everything is okay. But a Turkish Sultan, Abdul Hamid II, entered and he had this Armenian question that he wanted to solve. So all we saw was state-sponsored pogrom that went on. The first Armenian massacre happened. Then sometime along the line in 1908 to 1909, this Sultan was overthrown by a group of reformers named the Young Turks. And the Armenians felt at ease, thinking that it's a new day for them. But they didn't know that these Young Turks had the plan of Turkifying the entire empire. And what happened is they created a special squad and they had this systematic way of taking them out. First, they dealt with the intellectuals, they dealt with the business moguls. So in a way, they deprived them of intellectual and financial help. Then commoners were moved out of their homes and sent on dead marches through the Mesopotamian deserts without food, without water, and many of them died. People were drowned in rivers, thrown off cliffs, buried or burnt alive. Children were kidnapped and forced to convert to Islam. And the population of the Armenians just went down from 2 million to about 400,000. And what happened? Anyway, the issue of denial is there. The Turkish government denies till today. And so many others, including Germany, that was complicit in part of this as well. So the Armenians in Turkey today, they have galvanized resources to provide watertight evidence. Just as the other group by Obadiah Melafia, the document I showed us, they are currently trying to do now, is also to provide a watertight evidence. So when the Armenians did this, the US Congress was able in March 2010. That was 101 years or thereabout after the massacre happened. They voted to recognize the genocide, although Turkey still lives in denial. And even as we speak today, forensic studies are still going on just to describe what happened. Graves are being exhumed, mass graves are being exhumed, and people are being studied, the pattern of their deaths and the cause of their deaths. So the lesson from here is that no matter how long a genocide has been, we should and must do this. We should, how long it takes to define the Biafran genocide. Now, another lesson from Rwanda is within 100 days, at a rate of 100,000 deaths per day, we had 1 million people. So at the rate of 1,000 deaths per day, we had 1 million people die in Rwanda. And these were Tutsis and moderate Hutus. So what Rwanda did too is they set up a high-powered commission. And today we've seen people serving different jail terms for the crimes they committed. There are so many Tutsis, Hutus today living even as refugees in DR Congo today. So Rwanda is healing. It has healed to a very large extent. And Rwanda today is a thriving, upcoming nation in Africa. And serving as a beacon of hope. The Oputa panel would have been able to achieve this, but Oputa panel wasn't specific and it wasn't given the needed platform to work. So for us to go forward to a permanent commission on the killings in Nigeria, starting with the Biafran genocide, should be established so that people can seek redress, then perpetrators can actually go behind bars and people are appropriately rewarded. So this is another call for action. Another one too is in Guatemala. I have a very short video here on it, but I don't know whether I still have time to do that. Am I permitted? It's about 9 minutes.
Go ahead.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, I cut my show.
Okay. Can we see the screen? I'm trying to share it as well. Is it on? I don't know what
Click on it.
Is it on? Guatemala is recovering from a 36-year armed conflict. A conflict that was fought during.
We're just seeing the description. We're not seeing the video of
Okay. Sorry, let me see whether I can share the video as well. I guess I need to share the video.
No, I think what you need to do is embed the video.
Okay. Any change now? Is it going?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So just take your time to watch.
Guatemala is recovering from a 36-year armed conflict, a conflict that was fought during the Cold War. It was really just a small leftist insurgency and a devastating response by the state. What we have as a result is 200,000 civilian victims, 160,000 of those killed in the communities, small children, men, women, the elderly even. And then we have about 40,000 others, the missing, the ones we're still looking for today. We call them the desaparecidos. Now, 83% of the victims are Mayan victims. The victims that are the descendants of the original inhabitants of Central America, and only about 17% are of European descent. The most important thing here is that the very people who are supposed to defend us, the police, the military, are the ones that committed most of the crimes. Now, the families, they want information. They want to know what happened. They want the bodies of their loved ones. But most of all, what they want is they want everyone to know that their loved ones did nothing wrong. Now, my case was that my father received death threats in 1980, and we left Guatemala. We came here. So I grew up in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, as a matter of fact, and I went to New York High School, and I graduated from Brooklyn College. The only thing was that I really didn't know what was happening in Guatemala. I didn't care for it. It was too painful. But it wasn't until 1995 that I decided to do something about it. So I went back to Guatemala to look for the bodies, to understand what happened, and to look for part of myself as well. The way we work is that we give people information. We talk to the family members and we let them choose. We let them decide to tell us the stories, to tell us what they saw, to tell us about their loved ones. And even more important, we let them choose to give them a piece of themselves, piece, essence of who they are. And that DNA is what we're going to compare to the DNA that comes from the skeletons. While we're doing that, though, we're looking for the bodies. And these are skeletons by now. Most of these crimes happened 32 years ago. When we find the grave, we take out the dirt and eventually clean the body, document it, and exhume it. We literally bring the skeleton out of the ground. Once we have those bodies, though, we take them back to the city, to our lab, and we'll begin a process of trying to understand mainly two things. One is how people died. So here you see a gunshot wound to the back of the head, or machete wounds, for example. The other thing we want to understand, though, is who they are, whether it's a baby or an adult, whether it's a woman or a man. But when we're done with that analysis, what we'll do is we'll take a small fragment of bone and we'll extract DNA from it. We'll take that DNA and then we'll compare it with the DNA of the families, of course. The best way to explain this to you is by showing you two cases. The first is a case of the military diary. Now, this is a document that was smuggled out somewhere in 1999. And what you see there is the state following individuals, people that, like you, wanted to change their country. And they jotted everything down. And one of the things that they wrote down is when they executed them. So inside that yellow rectangle, you'll see a code. It's a secret code, 300. And then you see a date. The 300 means executed, and the date means when they were executed. Now that's going to come into play in a second. What we did is we conducted an exhumation in 2003, where we exhumed 220 bodies from 53 graves in a military base. Grave 9, though, matched the family of Sergio Salondinares. Now, Sergio was a professor at the university. He graduated from Iowa State University and went back to Guatemala to change his country. And he was captured on February 23rd, 1984. And if you can see there, he was executed on March 29th, 1984, which was incredible. We had the body, we had the family's information and the DNA, and now we have documents that told us exactly what happened. But most important is about 2 weeks later, we got another hit, another match from the same grave to Amancio Villatoro. The DNA of that body also matched the DNA of that family. And then we noticed that he was also in the diary. But it was amazing to see that he was also executed on March 29th, 1984. So that led us to think, how many bodies were in the grave? 6. So we said, how many people were executed on March 29th, 1984? That's right, 6 as well. So we have Juan de Dios, Hugo, Moises, and Zoilo. All of them executed on the same day, or captured at different locations and different moments, all put in that grave. The only thing we needed now was the DNA of those 4 families. So we went and we looked for them and we found them. And we identified those 6 bodies and gave them back to the families. The other case I want to tell you about is that of a military base called Crea un Paz. It actually means to believe in peace, but the acronym really means Regional Command Center for Peacekeeping Operations. And this is where the Guatemalan military trains peacekeepers from other countries, the ones that serve with the UN and go to countries like Haiti and the Congo. Well, we had testimony that said that within this military base, there was bodies, there was graves. So we went in there with a search warrant, and about 2 hours after we went in, we found the first of 84 graves, a total of 533 bodies. Now, if you think about that, peacekeepers being trained on top of bodies, it's very ironic. But the bodies, face down, most of them, hands tied behind their backs, blindfolded, all types of trauma. These are people that were defenseless, that were being executed. People that 533 families are looking for. And so we're going to focus on grave 15. Grave 15, when we noticed, was a grave full of women and children, 63 of them. And that immediately made us think, my goodness, where's there a case like this? When I got to Guatemala in 1995, I heard of a case of a massacre that happened on May 14th, 1982, where the army came in, killed the men, and took the women and children in helicopters to an unknown location. Guess what? The clothing from this grave matched the clothing from the region where these people were taken from, where these women and children were taken from. So we conducted some DNA analysis, and guess what? We identified Martina Rojas and Manuel Chen. Both of them disappeared in that case. So now we could prove it. We have physical evidence that proves that this happened and that those people were taken to this base. Now, Manuel Chen was 3 years old. His mother went to the river to wash clothes, and she left him with a neighbor. That's when the army came, and that's when he was taken away in a helicopter and never seen again. So we found him in grave 15. So now with science, with archaeology, with anthropology, with genetics, what we're doing is we're giving a voice to the voiceless. But we're doing more than that. We're actually providing evidence for trials, like the genocide trial that happened last year in Guatemala, where General Rios Montt was found guilty of genocide and sentenced to 80 years. So I come here to tell you today that this is happening everywhere. It's happening in Mexico right in front of us today. We can't let it go on anymore. We have to now come together and decide that we are not going to have any more missing. So no more missing, guys, okay? No more missing. Thank you.
Okay, let me go back to sharing. Okay, you can see my main screen now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just a summary of the video we saw. And they've been able to exhume about 30,000 bodies today, and they've named them appropriately, and they've returned them to their families for proper burial. So people need that closure. There are so many unmarked graves in Igbo land. There are so many people that left that never came back. People need closure, no matter how long it takes. I think we can equally do this. Our scientific community should hop on this to help us find this. Okay, so if another clear example too is Valiashem. That's the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Israel. And they did a very lovely job. For anyone who has visited that particular place, it's quite moving. It's quite moving. No matter how hardened you are, you come down to the silence of the spirit. And having 6 million Jews named with their photos, as many as possible, is something that we have to try to do. And in addition to that, on Nisan 27 of the Jewish calendar, they usually the whole nation of Israel stands still, an alarm goes off. And everybody, even those on the express, even those everywhere, everybody comes out and observes 2 minutes silence every year to remember those who died in the Holocaust. We can name our victims, especially now we have a few of them, their family members alive, or those that witnessed people being killed. It's 51 years now after the war. We are losing time. We really need to do this. We can also begin to erect sites and memorials in our local communities. In my little local community here when I was in Derby, in our post office, we had all post office members who died in any of their wars. At the train station, there are plaques with the names of the train station workers who died in any of the war. At the city center, citizens of that particular community were there. Even in my local church there, all the names of the members of the church, the parishioners who died in any of the wars, are all written in the churches there. And very soon, in next 2 weeks, you'll see them too, wearing their poppies and laying wreaths on their graves. So the Asaba monument is also a very lovely one for the Asaba massacre. So they've been able to put this, to name this, because when we name them, we are able to put face and humanity to this. We are not talking just about numbers. We're talking about people's children, husbands, wives, and the rest of them. So many people that left home but never returned. So that's why it's important. This is a very good attempt. I strongly believe that this should be better. This should be a site, a very strong, big site. So the Delta State government should do far more than this. And on the 11th of next month, on the 11th, by 11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th month in the UK here, we observe 2 minutes silence in honor of people that have died. I've had courses on several occasions to stop doing word round, to stand up and observe this. We are not even doing the list. We are not doing this at home. We are not doing it in Umuahia, my hometown. We are not doing it in anywhere in Abia State. And this is for our own people, and we don't need the North to enable us to do this. But at least I think we should start from the East. And I also think that it should be something that should be done nationally, because these are the things that will help us to foster unity and create that sense of shared responsibility of our shameful past. So I think we should hold a public holiday. Thank God the sit at home on that day is gaining traction, but we need it to be legalized in Igbo land. We need to have laws backing this up so that May 30th every year, everybody sits at home to reflect on those that we lost. So finally, genocide begins with an idea. Genocide begins with one man. Genocide begins with one victim, and it rapidly spreads and consumes targets and even bystanders. Because when the Holocaust started, the world kept silent. But at the end of the day, by the time the world realized what was going on, 6 million Jews have died, but 54 million non-Jews also died. 60 million people total in that war. And that was needless if everybody had spoken up. So it's not just about the Jews. When it spreads out, it affected 54 million non-Jews, and that is why we should never, ever keep silent. So can we learn the lessons of our tragic past? And can we today echo that timeless creed, Ozemena, never again? Thank you, and Daluno, Ndewono. Thanks.